Hello fellow sim racers. Apologies to anyone that expected an Assetto Corsa Competizione video today, but obviously the update hasn't been released, so no video. Instead, I'm responding to one of the more common requests I get and answering what I think is the best racing sim for people getting started in sim racing in 2019. So, I'm going to talk about 5 popular sim racing titles that would appeal to beginners, starting with a title that I think is the least beginner friendly and ending with what I think is the best racing sim for newcomers to the hobby. This isn't meant to be a comprehensive list of all the pros and cons of each of the sims, just an overview of some of the key considerations for those that are just starting out. Moreover, it's not a list of what I think are the best racing sims overall. As a side note, all of the racing sims have high points and generally speaking, they all have massive drawbacks. So I've tried to be as honest as I can with my appraisal of each of them. And of course, this is all just one person's opinion. So the list starts with rFactor 2, which is the undisputed king when it comes to physics. And for me at least, the driving experience is second to none. As a very detailed simulation, there's a lot of depth and complexity available to anyone that wants to explore it. On top of that, the newest content in the form of the GT cars and the Sebring track are absolutely top draw. In fact, when I asked viewers to name their favourite car and track of 2018, Sebring and the Endurance Pack for RF2 were the runaway winners. But as much as I love rFactor 2, it has some pretty hefty baggage, especially from the perspective of a newbie to sim racing. First and foremost, it's the content, or more accurately, the lack of content. While the newest DLC for RF2 is top notch, it all starts to get a bit more problematic when you step away from the official releases. There is a reasonable amount and variety of mod content available, but its quality varies massively. Next up is the user interface, which at best is unhelpful. But worse than that, it doesn't enable you all that much control over what you race and how. For a complex and powerful sim, this is pretty frustrating. Thankfully, a new UI is in the works and is expected within the next few months. Another aspect that's not that great at the moment, but should improve with planned updates, is the online side of things, which as it stands is pretty much limited to organised league racing, which isn't a problem in and of itself, but isn't necessarily the best option for absolute beginners. All in all, RF2 has a lot going for it, but it still feels a bit incomplete. And thanks to the steep learning curve, significant complexity and unfriendly UI, I would struggle to recommend it to an absolute beginner right now. To be completely fair to Studio 397, they're putting in a lot of effort to improve the sim, implement new features and bolster the available content, and from what I've seen, I fully expect to revise my opinion on this as new features are implemented. iRacing offers what is unquestionably the best competitive online racing of all of the sims, and if that's everything you want from a racing sim, then this is probably the title for you. With a strong emphasis on ranking the safety and speed of its drivers, iRacing produces a fantastic matchmaking system and a strong regular player base in its most popular series. For a rookie getting started in iRacing, there's plenty of great racing to be had, and if you're into ovals, it's pretty much the only game in town. When it comes to content, the laser scan tracks and the high quality cars are absolutely excellent, and the physics engine behind the game is refined, though not above criticism. When it comes to content, there are a limited number of series to take part in, so the variety of cars is much lower than all of the other sims in the list. And all of this comes at a cost. iRacing is a subscription service, meaning that you have to keep paying to use it. And then you have to pay for individual pieces of content as well, and they're not cheap. As a beginner, it makes sense to buy a short subscription and only purchase the exact content you need for the series you want to compete in order to keep the costs down while you're finding your feet with the sim. But it's not just the cost that's keeping iRacing from being higher up my list of recommendations. My biggest gripe about iRacing is the UI, or to be more accurate, the UIs. Much of this is handled through a website that's pretty dated and in my opinion at least not very intuitive. There's also the beta launcher that they introduced around a year ago and are slowly improving, but this really only includes a very small portion of the features you need at the moment. When combined with some of the more complex rules and vague explanations of how some of the behind the scenes stuff works in iRacing, it can seem pretty imposing for beginners. But If it's regular, close, ranked online racing you're after, and you're willing to pay the costs involved, then iRacing has a lot to offer. If you're more of an offline racer, then this isn't the sim for you. Regular viewers may have expected Assetto Corsa to be at the top of this list, but while AC is one of my favourite sims, there are a number of aspects that make it difficult to recommend to a complete novice. But before we get into that, let's talk about what's good about Assetto Corsa. In stock form, the selection of cars available is perhaps the best of the bunch, with everything from 1950s road cars to modern F1 represented. This is further enhanced by the modding community, which produces almost endless new content for the title. The underlying physics behind the title are widely praised, with the force feedback and tyre model in particular being high points. For me though, the things that make Assetto Corsa really stand out at the moment are the mods and add-ons, and they're not necessarily all that beginner friendly. First up, to get the most out of the game, you really need to replace the stock user interface, which is pretty average, with a program called Content Manager, which opens up a whole host of great user functionality. To enable night driving with lights and a whole host of other new features, you need to install the powerful shaders mod, and to get the most out of the visuals, the Sol Weather System mod is a must-have. On top of all that, there aren't many stock tracks, so you'll need to turn to the modding community for those, some of which are excellent, but there's also a lot of rubbish out there as well. Finally, when it comes to online racing, you have three options. Public server racing, which offers a wide variety of opportunities to drive GT3 cars at Spa, private league racing, and a service called Sim Racing System, which is sort of iRacing light. For me, Assetto Corsa is probably the most flexible of all the sims, giving users the opportunity to do pretty much anything they want, be it circuit racing, drifting, toge, or cruising. But a lot of this is enabled or enhanced with the help of a hefty number of mods, all of which need to be sourced, installed, and learned. So it's pretty far from being a turnkey solution, and anyone wanting to get the most out of Assetto Corsa will need to be willing to dedicate a fair bit of time to that side of things. To paraphrase something Jimmy Broadbent said in a recent video, when Project Cars 2 gets it right, it gets it very right. Visually speaking, it's stunning. As far as atmosphere goes, it's almost unrivaled, the selection of cars and tracks is extensive, and there's a lot of decent on- and offline racing to be had. For me, this is the title that bridges the gap between the more gameplay-focused titles like Forza and Gran Turismo and the more simulation-focused offerings in the list. As an introduction to sim racing, Project Cars 2 has a lot going for it, and on top of that, it's very polished and user-friendly. But while Project Cars reaches some dizzying highs, there's also some equally impressive low points. My biggest gripe is with the driving experience, which varies wildly from car to car. Much of this may be down to the stock setups, which seem to range from totally unworkable to that'll do. For an experienced sim racer, this is an annoyance, but from a newcomer to the hobby, it makes some of the cars a miserable experience to drive in their stock form. That being said, when you do find a car that behaves as it should, the driving experience is pretty decent. On that note, I'm not going to get into a debate about the Project Cars physics engine here, other than to say it does have more detractors than it has fans, but, in my opinion at least, offers a decent point of entry into the sim racing world. Project Cars 2 has always had a bit of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde problem. Whenever I load it up, I'm never sure whether I'm going to be getting the greatest sim racing experience of my life, or end up rage quitting 20 minutes in through sheer frustration. For me, it's a sim that tries to incorporate a bit too much, and as such, some of the fundamentals haven't been properly taken care of. All in all though, thanks to its user-friendly nature, selection of content, and decent single-player modes, Project Cars 2 is a decent place to start for beginners, but I very much view it as a stepping stone to other sims. So then, Raceroom is the sim that I'm most happy to recommend to beginners. While it's not my favourite sim overall, and I don't think it absolutely excels in any one particular area, it's consistently good across everything that matters, competitively priced, and it gives a great introduction to the world of sim racing. Let me break that down a little. Raceroom is free to play and comes with a small selection of tracks and cars to get you started. As you would expect, the additional cars and tracks are chargeable, but they're reasonably priced, and good discounts can be had by purchasing the various packs from the Raceroom store. This offers a very low cost entry into sim racing, which is pretty compelling if you don't know whether you're going to stick with it or not. The game itself is user friendly and pretty refined these days, and is still being constantly improved by Sector 3. It offers decent offline and online racing with good physics, force feedback, and what I would describe as the most aggressive AI in any racing sim. Overall, the driving experience in Raceroom is very enjoyable and will prepare new sim racers well for many of the other sims. When it comes to content, Raceroom covers a significant number of racing series and has dozens of circuits available. It's worth mentioning, however, that the game is more focused on tin-top cars than single-seaters. While the online racing is very solid in my experience, the game offers a lot to offline-only players as well, with custom grids, custom championships, and a plethora of game modes and tweaks allowing users to set up things exactly as they please. But like the other sims, Raceroom isn't without its flaws. Graphically, the game is pretty dated. There's no mod support, so you're stuck with whatever content Sector 3 decide to produce, and the selection of cars and tracks may not be to everyone's taste. Furthermore, the Raceroom store system that compels you to pay for items using their own special currency called VRP is pretty universally disliked, not because it's problematic, but because it's totally needless. So, all in all, I think Raceroom is the best place to start for beginners because it has the lowest barrier for entry. It's free to start with and offers a fairly polished overall experience. Moreover, I think it's the sim that has the least number of weird quirks, and it's devoid of any major drawbacks, which makes it an excellent introduction to the hobby. Personally speaking, putting together this video was an interesting exercise that forced me to think about the racing simulators that I play on a daily basis from a different perspective. And I was surprised to find that the racing sims that I enjoy the most are probably the hardest to recommend to newcomers for a wide variety of different reasons. As I said at the beginning of the video, this is all just my opinion and it shouldn't be taken as gospel. In fact, I'd encourage anyone that disagrees with the conclusions I've come to leave a comment telling me, and everyone else, why I'm wrong. So that about brings us to a close here. Hopefully my next video should be about Assetto Corsa Competizione Build 6, but all bets are off at this stage. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then it'd be great if you could hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And if you think the video will be helpful for others, then please consider sharing it. As always, thank you for donating your precious free time by watching. It is very much appreciated. So all that's left to say is goodbye, thank you for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.